Hello and welcome. My name is Greg Van Antwerp. I'm a member of the Board of Trustees of the New Milford Historical Society, and with me today is David Cohen. David Cohen is also a member of the Board of Trustees of the New Milford Historical Society, but David is here to tell us about something really special, and that is the new exhibit at the museum called The Jewish Experience in New Milford. Did I get that right, David?
Yes, you definitely got that right. Yes.
Thank you, thank you. So, David, tell me about this exhibit.
The Jewish community in New Milford developed in three phases. The first, it was in the late 19th century, and there were only two Jewish families at that time that settled. Both of them are very interesting. Max Neisner and Alexander Levy. Both were well integrated into New Milford society. Alexander Levy was a 33rd degree Mason. They were both active, especially Neisner was active he was a Civil War veteran, active in the Grand Army of the Republic, which was a veterans organization, as well as in the Volunteer Firemen's Association. In fact, he donated a chair, a beautifully carved, ornate, high-back chair, to the fire department in 1890 that is still being used today in the year 2024, 134 years later, by the president of the fire company for their monthly meetings.
Wow, that's a great little capsule of Jewish American history. So we have how many families that?
That period, there were just two families: the Neisner family and the Levy family.
Wow, and they emigrated from where?
They emigrated from the Pale of Settlement, as it's known, which was in areas of Poland, Lithuania, Russia, Western Russia, etc. And that was sort of phase one of the development of the Jewish community. Both of those families, however, left New Milford after the fire of 1902. Both of them had stores along Bank Street. Since there was a fire in 1902 that basically destroyed their businesses, they both decamped.
I understand. Yeah, that was a time of turmoil for a lot of families.
The second phase was marked by the coming to New Milford of Joseph Golden, who was the sort of key figure, the seminal figure in the development of the Jewish community in New Milford in the first several decades of the 20th century. He had come from the Pale Settlement, actually west of Minsk, what is now in part of Russia, and he had emigrated here in about 1898. He moved first to Poughkeepsie, where he had family, he had a sister and family, and he was a peddler, and his route took him from Poughkeepsie to New Milford. And he became so entranced by the beauty of the Housatonic River Valley.
What's the significance of the dime? It's symbolic, I understand.
Yes, he had only one dime when he actually moved here from when he came here to the United States. And so that's sort of symbolic of how he basically, from this dime, basically was able to build a meaningful life for his family, and for a generation of other Jews in New Milford.
From that dime, a mighty oak, which was a family tree, right?
Yes, that's a very good way of putting it. A little more on the second phase, because there are other families. The Kramers were also. Alex Kramer came here a bit later in 1910, 1915, 15 or so, actually set up his store, I believe, in 1922 or 1924 in New Milford. And he had also emigrated from the same region, I believe, from Poland. And he had, like Joseph Golden, they were all very ambitious. They would do anything to basically basically accumulate enough money to bring other members of the family over, as well as to establish businesses for themselves. And so one of the odd jobs Alex Kramer came was skinning horses. In other words, in Pennsylvania.
Would that be like a tannery?
Yeah, that would be sort of like a tannery in Pennsylvania. And he managed to get enough money and came here to New Milford and set up a store opposite Joseph Golden's, and both were in the clothing business. So there was some degree of friendly rivalry between the two. Although since they were both Jewish, they obviously they respected each other. And so Alex Kramer was probably the second. It was the second family to come here, and over the years. There were about 8 or 10 other families that came here before the Second World War. And that includes the barracks. That includes the Lappins were here. Nathan Schiff, who was a tailor. Joseph Golden, however, was integral in setting up a religious community that met in his home and the homes of various other families. And so he is considered the father of the Jewish community in New Milford. He went to New York and was able to get prayer books and the Torah, etc. And his home and the home of others was where services were held throughout until about 1944. When the initial temple, which was called Temple Aaron, Beth Aaron as it was called, was disbanded. And so that was the second phase.
That's the second phase. So tell me about the third phase. Now we have some artifacts here,
Yes.
and which I want to know which period those artifacts fall into. I see what we have here is a coat hanger from the Kramer store. Okay. So there's a lot of things for people to see here. This is
Yes.
what we're here today to do is to kind of introduce the presentation that's going to happen, officially opening this exhibit to the New Milford community and its surrounding area. So we're going to what we're going to do is we're going to wrap up now, and we're going to come back after the presentation, and we're going to talk a little bit about the organization, the group that made this happen.
Start by saying on behalf of the Board of Directors or our Board of Trustees of the New Milford Historical Society, I would like to welcome you. Traditionally, museums like ours, a historical museum, have some things that they're supposed to do. One is to collect, display, and preserve the history of the town that you're in. The second one we take very seriously because we feel it's important. That is to engage and educate visitors to our museum in a broad and fact-based manner about the complete stories of the past. The faces in the portraits that you see in this room are indeed the first immigrant settlers in New Milford, and their contributions to the town are noteworthy. But in order to present a more complete picture of the town, it is imperative to show that there were many subsequent groups of immigrant settlers who accomplished and contributed just as much to our town. I would like to thank all of those who have contributed to this exhibit. Temple Shalom, Ted Hine and the exhibit committee, our museum staff, and especially to David Cohen for bringing his vision to this exhibit to our museum. One of the big things that we are concerned with, times being what they are, that we're living through right now, we feel that it's important for a museum like ours to really lean into the education part of our exhibits. And the reason for that is there is convincing truth that education goes a long way in correcting preconceived notions and improves the understanding of our cultural differences, which can lead to discovering that we all have much more in common with each other than the things we think separate us. So I would just like you to keep that in mind, that that's what our goal really is. Yes, we preserve all of this stuff and they're in boxes in the attic, but the most important part is to share that with people who come into our museum and try to change some minds.
Amen.
While I know that most of you aren't going to see something that you don't already know, I do hope that when you leave here, you feel a great sense of pride in all of the people who came here before you. The exhibit is not in this room, as I think you've already figured out. So you go to the door behind me, you take a left-hand turn, you walk up a little hallway, and the exhibit starts on the left wall, and then when you get to the end, you can't go any further. There's another open door, that's called Gordon's door, and the rest of the exhibit is in there. So I hope that you enjoy your day with us, and I would like you to now just sort of stop for a minute because we'd like to play the Israeli national anthem for you. I'm sorry, make sure I have it in the right order. All right, we're just going to play them all. I'm sorry, I'm ready to get this going. Have a few other speakers. I would like to first introduce Dorothy Golden Hunt, who is the granddaughter of Joseph Golden, so you would be seated. She'll be speaking to you.
It is so wonderful to be here at the New Milford Historical Society, celebrating the Jewish experience in New Milford exhibit. My parents, who were longtime members of the Historical Society, and my grandparents would be both amazed and pleased. Thank you to the members of Temple Sholom, who contributed to this exhibit, researching the temple's history and progress through the end of the 20th century and into the 21st. And a big thank you to David and Jane Cohen, whose work and dedication to this project have made it possible. Thank you also to the Historical Society for launching the exhibit and this event. By the way, the New Milford Historical Society was the first museum I ever visited. I was probably about 10 years old, and I was absolutely enthralled. At that time, the Historical Society was not in this building. It was still located on the corner of Boardman Terrace and Main Street. There are 10 Goldens here today, along with our husbands and wives. 2 are the great-grandchildren of Joseph and Eva Golden. 7 are Joe and Eva's grandchildren, and 1 is the daughter of Joe's brother, Isidore, and his wife, Evelyn. Isidore is the little boy in the picture that was used for the postcard announcing this exhibit. That picture was taken of him and his sister with their parents, Aaron and Elke, just prior to their 1906 voyage to America to join Joe and his 2 older brothers in New Milford. Isidore was the first Golden to attend New Milford Public Schools, and my brother Lou was the last, graduating from New Milford High School in 1970. In the years between Isidore and Lou, New Milford has educated numerous Goldens. 2 have made it to the New Milford High School Hall of Fame. Cousin Archie, who is Isidore's son, and my father, Merrill, Joe's son. Thinking about this project has had me living in the past for a good part of the last year, and it has been fun. I'll share some of my memories and some conclusions. My father was the oldest of Joe and Eva's children. He and his next younger brother, Lawrence, followed their father in the family clothing store, Golden's, which was located just across from the movie theater on Bank Street. Dad loved New Milford. He lived his entire 91 years here, all within a mile radius of where he was born on Housatonic Avenue. He once commented, that he was surprised to hear that some people who ran afoul of the law were sentenced to community service. For him, community service was something you did because you were part of a community. Dad was a member of Waterwitch Hose Company No. 2, at one time was the New Milford ambulance driver, was co-chair of New Milford's 1957 250th anniversary celebration, served a short term on the school board, and in 1949 was a founding member of the John Pettibone Memorial Scholarship Fund. Mr. Pettibone was principal of New Milford High School and superintendent of schools when Dad was a student. Dad later served as president of the Pettibone Fund and remained on the board until his death. After retiring from the family clothing store in 1970, Dad took a part-time position as a bookkeeper with the New Milford Visiting Nurse Association. He eventually retired from that job, but continued to volunteer there until just before he died in 2001. My mother, Marjorie, married my father in 1947, and in doing so, she also married the Golden family and New Milford. Mom became a member of the board of the VNA almost as soon as she moved to New Milford, later serving as its president. She routinely volunteered at the VNA well child clinics. While Lou and I were in school, Mom was an active PTA member, room mother, Girl Scout leader, and Cub Scout den mother. My parents joined the Marial Community Center, and I have vivid memories of Mom spending hours on the phone helping to organize community events. Mom and Dad also volunteered at New Milford Hospital and, as mentioned before, were members of the Historical Society. My parents were instrumental in founding Temple Shalom, and I have to say here that Marilyn Leaf was also right there with them the whole way, and here she sits today.
Golden were indispensable Without Merrill's mathematical ability and your mother's extraordinary ability for so many things, and a wonderful cook and a wonderful baker, and my best friend. So, thank you.
Thank you. I remember the early days of attending services in the chapel of the Congregational Church, thanks to Reverend Russell Eyre, and the excitement around the novelty of the first services. A particular memory is walking with my grandmother, Eva, who would not drive on the Sabbath. Though she was already in poor health, it was very important to her to be part of the new temple. I remember when our rabbi, or actually a whole sequence of rabbis, were students from the Hebrew Union College in New York. They would come up here in time to conduct the Friday night Sabbath service, conduct Saturday morning services in the hospital in Newtown, and then teach our religious school classes on Sunday. One rabbi added to all of that by stopping to pick up Donnie Shapiro, Teddy Barrick, and me from our Saturday morning bowling league. He would then bring us to my house, and after we all ate lunch, which was provided, of course, by my mother, the rabbi taught us how to read Hebrew. Dad was the second president of the temple, and Mom served many terms as president of the temple sisterhood. We attended religious school, taught by our Aunt Evelyn. My cousin Judith and I, together, had the first bat mitzvah in Temple Shalom. Years later, when the congregation had matured to the point of needing its own building and needing to hire a full-time rabbi, Mom and Dad were still in the forefront of planning and fundraising. Testimony to their involvement, the groundbreaking ceremony for the building on Route 7 featured my teenage brother Lou wielding the shovel to actually break the ground. Mom and Dad continued to support Temple Shalom unwaveringly for the rest of their lives. Lou and I grew up in an atmosphere of close family ties and close community ties. In our early days, our grandmother lived just upstairs. Our uncle and aunt and cousins lived next door. More cousins lived up the road. Dad's other brothers and his sister and the rest of our cousins lived close enough to visit. There were constant, large family gatherings. My parents had friends throughout town. There were few places we could go and not be known. Dad remained friendly with his schoolmates, his customers, his fellow merchants, and many former employees from the store. The store regularly hired local high school and college students each summer. "Oh, I know your father," was a constant refrain wherever I went. And sometimes it was, "I knew your grandfather. He helped me when I first came to town." Throughout my 12 years in New Milford schools, I had teachers who were Dad's former classmates, or my aunt or uncle's classmates, or had taught my cousins, or had worked in the store. I also have lifelong friendships from New Milford, and I'm so happy to say some of my classmates are here today. None of my closest friends were Jewish, including my high school boyfriend, Kim Hunt, to whom I am still married. New Milford was good to and for my family, and my family was good to and for New Milford. We are indelibly linked to New Milford and its Jewish community. We are living examples of the richness of the Jewish experience in New Milford. I have not actually lived here for over 50 years, but New Milford remains the basis for my identity. It has defined my life. New Milford is who I am, and where I am from. I am very proud to say I am a Golden from New Milford.
Introduce our next speaker, former mayor, Reba Furman, but she never really technically left office because she's everywhere all the time.
Thank you. It's so wonderful to see so many people here, so many friends, so many neighbors, so many fellow congregants in Temple Shalom, so many esteemed individuals from the community. This is just a really wonderful occasion. And who would have thought that we would be here at the New Milford Historical Society celebrating our Judaism here in New Milford. I want to thank David and his sidekick, Jane Cohen. All the members and officers of the Historical Society for bringing this exhibition here. And hopefully you'll get tons and tons of people in, not just to see the exhibit, but to see this wonderful building that is so much part of New Milford. So the reason I'm speaking here today is because I was, and still am, the first Jewish mayor of New Milford. And so I'm going to share just some random thoughts about things that happened while I was mayor that kind of let me remember that I was a Jew in New Milford. I guess the word is stranger in a strange land. But I wasn't a stranger, but it was a strange land for me in the beginning. I came to New Milford 40 years ago from Boston. I was raised in Newton, Massachusetts, which is the Garden City, and had 5 temples, and each temple had 2,500 members at a minimum. It was a huge Jewish population, and so I was raised with Yiddishkeit. My father was the shamus in our temple, so I grew up at services every Friday, Saturday, holiday, you name it. So Judaism is an integral part of my life. It is part of my faith. It is part of my beliefs, and it dictates what I do and how I do it. A main tenet of Judaism is called tikkun olam, which is the process of repairing the world. And it suggests that human actions can help to heal a fractured world and restore divine unity. And in modern times, this concept has been more broad, and it talks about social action and humanitarian efforts. As Marge said, her family worked for the community so much, and the community always gives back. 40 years ago, when I was just a spring chicken, I worked in an advertising agency called Maslow, Gold, and Rothschild. So you can guess what the camaraderie there was like. When I announced I was moving to New Milford, the creative director jumped up and said, "I went to camp there. I went to Bucks Rock." And that was my introduction. And so I began my research on my new hometown to be, and I found out there was a temple in town. And that made a really big difference and brought me comfort that I was moving to a place that had a Jewish community. I called Rabbi Koch and I said to him, "Where are the Jewish neighborhoods?" So you laugh because you all know what his answer was. But Rabbi Koch introduced me to Evelyn Golden. And Evelyn endeavored to find me a Jewish neighborhood. She took me to different homes, to different places. She told me about the butcher. She told me, everything I needed to know. The first time I went to temple was to say Kaddish for my father. That's a prayer you say in memoriam on the anniversary of their death. The congregants there heard my Hebrew, and within days I became a teacher in the children's education program, where I taught for 8 years. I had a stint on the board, and for years I wrote and produced the monthly newsletter. I still kept kosher when I moved here, and I remembered how we would call our orders into the butcher, and then we would go park in front of the temple on a morning, and the butcher would drive up with our order. And I felt like I was really in a shtetl, that they had to bring our meat into us. So in 1985, I moved into my home in Gaylordsville, and within a week or two, the Iroquois Gas Transmission Company announced they were building a pipeline. That pipeline was going to go from Canada to Long Island Sound through my neighborhood. I was appalled. How could this happen? How could they do that? So I began my journey to protect New Milford from outside forces and at times from itself. That led me to the Planning Commission, the Democratic Town Committee, and to serving my community as an elected officer and now as a volunteer. My first race was against Representative Oscar Rogg. It was a race of great contrast. It was Democrat versus Republican, a Jew versus a German, a Democrat versus a Republican, I said that already, a man versus a woman, and an environmentalist against a friend of development. I remember being at the village fair campaigning when a friend of Mr. Rogg's, who shall remain nameless, but he was also of German nationality, came by and he looked me in the eye and he said, "We're gonna make it hot for you." And I went, what? I had never heard such a thing from anyone in New Milford. I was astounded, and that campaign taught me a lot, including I learned about deed restrictions on lake property around Candlewood Lake. Who knew that they didn't want Jews there? Well, I lost that race, only by 200 votes. I went on to run against Oscar's brother, Walter. Again, it was the same contrast. Jewish Democrat woman environmentalist against Republican German male who once made fun of those who cared about the birds and the bees. Well, I won that race, much to Art Cummings' shock. After taking office.
We endorsed you.
I know you did, but it still was a shock. After taking office on December 1st, 1991, I heard from a friend that the word on the street was, the new Jewish mayor, she's not going to put up a Christmas tree. Well, that's all I had to hear, because of course I was going to put one up. But now, I put up the biggest tree New Milford ever saw. I spent days decorating it, getting tinsel. The town hall was lit up like you can't believe. Boughs, wreaths, ribbons. I even put up a second tree indoors, and I decorated it so beautifully with all white hydrangea. It was my first time decorating for Christmas. I was so excited. And I got 3 more times. So while it was not my personal holiday, I was very happy to share it with the community. Throughout my term, I was conscious that I was Jewish, and I was proud of it. People would say, Liba, what kind of a name is that? You know, are you a Libra? Which I am, but I said, it's Yiddish, for love, like Liebchen. Furman, they wanted to know what that was. Was it German, Austrian? I said, well, it's my last name. So. My first Hanukkah in office, I put a menorah in the town hall window. I think it's the first time there ever had been one. And as an aside, when my dear friend Mayor Pete Bass became mayor, what's the first thing I did, Pete? I bought you a menorah for his window. I was invited to many different ceremonies, and as mayor you go places. A few stand out in my mind. The Baptist Church on Route 7 next to the temple. When they built their new wing, I was invited there to speak. And it was like, what am I going to talk about? What am I going to say? But, I did. And then they stood up and sang a most beautiful song dedicated to me. I mean, it was just amazing. One time in my office, some developer type came into me and was sitting talking at the table. And all of a sudden, I heard these words come out of his mouth, Jewish lightning. And I had to stop and say, what's that? Because I didn't know it was arson. Another time during a heated budget session that went on for weeks, because in those days, you didn't approve a budget in 3 days, you approved it in 3 weeks if you were lucky. And we needed to add an extra meeting. So I said, okay, let's meet this Wednesday. And all of a sudden, everyone went, that's Holy Wednesday. I said, what the heck is Holy Wednesday? I had never heard of it. So instead, they decided to add an extra meeting on Shabbos. Flash forward to 2017. I was asked who would I vote for mayor. And I said to people, and I'm a Democrat, I've always been a Democrat, I said, Pete Bass, because he's a man of faith, and he's a man who cares. And I know nothing about his platform or whatever. All I knew was he was a man of faith, and he was a good man. And we've had Pete as our mayor since then. I just say that because there's a bond between people, between all of us here, between the community, and it's something that's really important to cultivate. We're all the same. We all have beliefs. We all care. And so I guess what I would say is, in summation, that I have had a positive experience as a Jew living here in New Milford, because if that's the only things I can recall in 40 years, that's pretty good. It's pretty good. I've seen the town change for the good. It's grown, but we accept and we welcome those, not just of the Jewish faith, but of so many multicultural backgrounds who are coming to town. And that's what makes New Milford the best town in the USA.
And we now will hear from the current mayor, Pete Bass.
Thank you, Kathleen. Thank you, Mayor Furman. And thank you, everyone, for being here today. It's great to see so many people here. I think what really transcends through everything, I come from a Greek background, is culture. It's how we take our cultures and our experiences, and we blend them together for the benefit of our community. And it only enriches our community. And one of the things that I noticed here, committee members that were here, some of the great names that are here. I remember Rabbi Koch. I know Rabbi Ari's over here. I just saw him. Rabbi Cohen. Right? Some other great names. Sue Gallant, who just passed away. Amazing lady. Mr. Kessler. Knew him for many years. And, you know, Mr. Cohen, we've talked about this before. You let me have, was a true treat for me when your dad was on the porch. And I'd known him for many years too. So able to sit down, we had a birthday cake for him, and talk to him for a little while. And just those experiences and the giving. Mayor Murphy, Mayor Furman, continues to this day to give to our town in so many different ways. Riverfront revitalization, we're putting a cultural district together. Just tons and tons of things that she does without a lot of people not even knowing. Just amazing stuff that people do in and out of this town each and every day. The Goldens are here. I've known Mr. Joe Golden over here since I've been 18 years old. And it's through these tapestries of life, these cultures that blend together. As Mayor Furman talked about before, we've seen a growth in our community, an enriching growth in my opinion. Different cultures coming to town, different ethnicities. And they bring a true melting pot, which is what we all want, because it only makes our town better. And I can't thank Rabbi, I can't thank the Jewish heritage enough for all you've done for our community and continue to do each and every day. And I know the town truly supports you. Truly supports you. And can't thank you enough for everything that you've done and continue to do. It's a true pleasure, it's a true honor to be here today. And again, it's all these tapestries that we see combining together to truly make the town, as Mayor Furman just said, best town in the USA.
Now, I know that all of you are thinking that I forgot somebody to speak, but the rabbi would like to go last because he has a special blessing to start off the rest of the afternoon. So I would like to introduce to you now Rabbi Mark Cohen.
Thank you so much. I am deeply honored to be here on this day, and I thank the coordinators from our Jewish community, from David and Jane Cohen, Sandy and Joan Ivler, and Lori Winterfeld for all of your very kind words. And of course, the New Milford Historical Society for honoring the Jewish community with this exhibit. Many, many thanks for your leadership and working to make all of this happen. This exhibition highlights the Jewish presence locally and gives honor to the small but mighty few who made sure to make a life for themselves and preserve our people's heritage and connection to one another. And literally we stand upon their shoulders on this very day. The vast majority of Jews in North America arrived here looking a lot like the Golden family, which is pictured in the main publicity for this exhibit. We came largely from Central and Eastern Europe, often penniless or near penniless, and for some of our relatives, we were told that this land was the Golden Medina, in Yiddish, the Golden Land, where the streets were paved with gold. Whether to California or Connecticut, Jews like the Goldens and the Neisners and the Levies, early Jewish residents to this area, they found the streets were far more mud and dirt than gold, but it offered a world that was better than what we knew in the old country. What has made the Jewish experience in America unique was drafted into an unofficial policy, though prevailing view, by this great nation's first president in a letter that he sent to the Touro Synagogue of Newport, Rhode Island, and to be standing literally in the shadow of the portrait of Washington is quite something. George Washington wrote famously, "It is now no more that toleration is spoken of, as if it were the indulgence of one class of people that enjoyed another exercise of their inherent natural rights. For happily the government of these United States, which gives to bigotry no sanction, to persecution no assistance, requires only that they who live under its protection should demean themselves as good citizens, in giving it on all occasions their effectual support." That's language that we, the Jewish people, had never heard before. Indeed, he went on to say, "May the children of the stock of Abraham who dwell in this land continue to merit and enjoy the goodwill of the other inhabitants, while everyone shall sit in safety under his own vine and fig tree, and there shall be none to make him afraid." Quoting no less than from the prophet, the Israelite prophet Micah. And over the nearly 200 years of Jewish history in New Milford and its environs, Jews have contributed in countless ways, as merchants, tailors, cattle dealers, who knew that Jews were in cattle, lawyers, school teachers, medical professionals, and more. And we have been public servants, advocates for civil society, devoted citizens who invest with a variety of their resources into the local community. I am a complete newcomer to these parts, but it is quite clear to me that whether individuals have been here for many years, come as part-time residents, or only recently moved here, New Milford evokes feelings of comfort, of joy, of pride, of gratitude. And that is our job as Americans, to invest fully in being good citizens of our town, our county, our state, and our nation. We are to support and help build something positive for the citizens of this land. And despite those high-minded words of Washington not always being implemented by every citizen in every moment, this exhibit's very existence is a reminder that we live in a land that values our Jewish presence, and that indeed we have contributed. We have very much been the beneficiaries of the hospitality, the kindness, the generosity, and I pray we only continue to contribute and participate with our fellow Americans to make a nation where everyone can sit beneath their vine and their fig tree, and none shall make them afraid. King Yiratzon, may it be God's will, may we make it our own as well. And with that, the reason I went last is to be near the food. So, in order for us to eat a little something, we have to say a bracha. We have to say a blessing for that. There are two things we're going to do. We've got wine here that we're going to drink. We use wine or grape juice because, as we like to say, God made the grapes and we make the wine. That's our partnership. What's holy is when we partner with one another in order to bring about something special, unique. That's holiness. So the blessing we say is God is the creator of the fruit of the vine. The words in Hebrew, if you want to try it out for size, is Borei Pri Hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, Borei Pri Hagafen. Amen. And then, the next blessing is over challah, which I understand Joan Ivler made. Is that right? Yeah. So for that, we talk about God is the one who is hamotzi lechem min haaretz. God is the one who brings forth bread from the earth. Again, God has made the wheat, and that we make all kinds of sumptuous delicacies with that, to reminding us of the partnership that we have and that we can create with one another. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Everyone can come and eat. We can do a shechianu because the truth of the matter is you're right, Leva. I guess that's going to be just a general statement. But I was thinking about a shechianu because we do a shechianu when something special has happened, like a holiday, right? That we give thanks to God for our life, for sustaining us and bringing us to that occasion. And we do shechianu in particular when there's something that's renewing or that's happening again. And so, for that partnership, for our opportunity, for our life and being with one another, we do indeed give thanks to God for safe voyage for those families who came here initially, for welcoming presence who were able to make life sustainable and work in partnership with one another, and so that we can stand here today on this beautiful fall day of 2024 and give thanks. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, she'echianu v'kiyamanu v'higyanu l'zman hazeh. Amen. Sandy?
There's more of that same challah on the main table in the challah bar.
Once you pull that back, there's all kinds of magic back here. Many thanks to the New Milford Historical Society on this day.
So that was a wonderful presentation that we just saw, and we're going to pick up now and finish up this interview with David Cohen and talk a little bit more about we missed a phase. We want to talk about the third phase.
Yes, exactly.
Tell us about the third phase, David.
The third phase occurred after World War II, and it was associated with the influx of Jewish families from the New York region, part of the sort of suburbanization movement of the 1960s and 1970s, that many Jewish families settled in this area, and many settled right here, settled in this area, and they wished to form a religious community. This was the origins of the start of the present Temple Shalom. Okay. There were several meetings that occurred before this happened, which was in the late 1950s. After the formation of Temple Shalom, the formal formation, they did not formally have a home. Right. But they met for services in the First Congregational Church. The Reverend Iyer, I believe that's the pronunciation, was very generous as well as the congregants, in allowing the Jewish community in New Milford to hold services in the church. And so for the next 10 years during the 60s, until the late Temple Shalom was built, I believe, 1970, completed 1971, the Congregational Church was sort of the home of or at least the spiritual home of the Jewish community. So in 1970 was founded, and there were a number of rabbis until Rabbi Norman Koch became rabbi of the congregation, and he was there for, I have to check this, I think for about 35 years. Wow. Yeah. Wow. And so that was...
David, you have a significance. You are actually the last member of the sort of original Jewish community, Jewish families, still living in New Milford. Is that right?
That is correct. Yes, it turns out the connection is, basically my father was born here in 1920, and his parents, my grandfather and grandmother, came here in about 1910 and were my grandfather was a cattle dealer and a dairy farmer and a horse trader as well. And so I'm actually, it turns out, by circumstance, I'm the last of the original families here.
Wow. There's one other person we may have left out, and who is that?
And that's my son, Zach Cohen, who now is a resident of New Milford.
So, and that kind of leads us to the formation or the idea behind developing this exhibit for the New Milford Historical Society. How did that come about?
And we thought that since we had an exhibit on the Black experience, why not explore the history of other ethnic groups, so to speak, ethnic religious groups in New Milford who have made contributions to this community? And so out of this came the suggestion, why not focus first on the Jewish community, and hopefully we'll be able to have exhibits in the future on other ethnic groups in New Milford.
Sure. So the committee was made up of how many people?
It was made up of myself, Ted Hine, who was the man who managed the project, Sandy and Joan Ivler, and Lori Winterfeld, and we all made significant contributions. We all had sort of different capabilities and expertise that we brought to this project, and we had, as a team, we had a great interaction. And in fact, if I may tell you an anecdote, we spent about 4.5 hours or 5 hours reviewing the initial versions of the boards that are now being displayed. We held it at our place, our home on the green. And Ted Hine afterward said, I spent 4.5 hours without a break. We didn't have a collective break. Right. But I enjoyed every single minute of it, just because of the intense discussions and the liveliness of the interaction.
And such a positive result. What we have here is not just these wonderful exhibits in this cabinet, but we also have these terrific boards. We have a timeline that people can follow. Exactly. And then we have other exhibit windows in our hallway out here. And then we have these great printed boards that are easy to read, and you can follow the whole story. So it's really, really something worth coming and seeing. And again, it helps to develop a sense of community within New Milford that we embrace all nationalities, all ethnicities, and all religions. And we want everybody to feel that this museum is a part of their community, which belongs to them, and it's really just our job to help preserve that and keep it going. So, David, I want to thank you very much for this interview and for your work on the exhibit.
And thank you for being so expert in terms of conducting, and also to the museum, especially the Kathy and Anita, for actually agreeing to go ahead with this. And providing the resources necessary to get it done.
It's a great cumulative effort, and if anybody out there wants to join the Historical Society as either as a member or a member of the Board of Trustees, we welcome you to come to our meetings, and we'll put those up for you to see, and contact information. But David, I want to thank you for your time today and all your work, and I want to thank you for watching, and it's kind of onward and upward to see what the museum will put together next. But right now we've got a lot for people to see. So thank you very much, David.
You're welcome. Thanks again.